Warning, the following podcast may cause you to question your belief in government, disregard authority, get arrested, be disowned, or deported.
Welcome to another episode of the School of Anarchy podcast. Today is July 31st, 2014. We are your hosts. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Andy.
Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or our RSS feed. Also, if you have any suggestions or about topics for shows, send us an email or a comment.
This is the Never Get Involved in a Land War in Asia edition of the podcast. Aaron's a big fan of World War I. Little known fact, Aaron used to be a World War I soldier.
That was right before I was a particle physicist or whatever we claimed I was last episode.
That's right.
All right, so this week marks the 100th anniversary of the beginning of World War I. Andy and I have been listening to Tom Woods, and in jealousy of him, we're doing a podcast talking about war tonight. It's amazing what you find out if you study anything about World War I, and I'm actually going to go right off of the show notes and jump down quite a bit and talk about an article in USA Today. Oh, so this USA Today article claims that there are three important lessons learned from World War I. And as Andy noted before we began the podcast, these are extremely erudite and focused points that are made.
Well, and you could only have three because that's the amount of space that they have on their web server to fit the article.
Yeah, I think actually the number of words that he wrote under each point, it might be, when you add them all together, it's like 1,500 or whatever their limit is. So let's just jump in here. The first one is exhaust diplomacy before you use force.
That's an epiphany if I ever heard one.
This is just disturbing to me. Like, how is it that these people think that this is something that you needed a great war to learn?
All the wars before World War I, we were like, if only we had done something before we started fighting. What can we do? I don't understand.
It's like when we were kids, the bully used to just beat the snot out of us, completely unprovoked. We wanted to talk to him, but we decided not to, just to see if he would punch us in the face again.
So I went and got my daddy's gun.
Right, yeah. I just don't understand it. And of course, we come from a tradition, or have come into a tradition, I guess I should say, where we have the non-aggression axiom, which, yes, why don't we just say, don't even worry about the diplomacy, just don't use the force right. Unless you're aggressed upon.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point of diplomacy in that instance is to diffuse the other side, right? If you're the one,
right, exactly.
You can only control your side, but
certainly, right. But as much as you can, obviously, you still don't want to use force, even if it's initiated upon you.
Right.
This strangest thing about this is there's a quote from a guy named Nicholas Burns, and he was a veteran diplomat who served as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in President George W. Bush's second term. This guy somehow knows something about this point. Is that possible? If you served as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs under George W. Bush, you have nothing to say about war. War? Oh, no, I have no idea. We don't have anything to do with that here. Right? Isn't that the correct answer?
You mean diplomacy. You have nothing to say about diplomacy.
Well, that's true.
Plenty to say about war.
No, I mean, at this point, shouldn't you be saying that you didn't... I had no knowledge of such matters.
Oh, you mean they should be in total denial? Like, wasn't me. I wasn't on the grassy knoll. I wasn't in Houston that day.
I've never met George W. Bush. I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
There's always a way out, except in Iraq, where we decided to go in and kill people.
No, because you can't negotiate with terrorists. That's obviously you haven't read the right books and articles on this subject. But diplomacy is not an option when you're dealing with those people. And I'm putting them
Oh,
in,
I see what
putting
you're
them
saying.
in air quotes here.
So what you're saying is that when I go and look in Iraq, I should look right next to the weapons of mass destruction for the terrorists?
Now that's a low blow.
All right, so I think that's
You've said enough about that, yes. Number 2, I love this one. War is always unpredictable. It's what's the name of that? Tautology, right? It's like war is war, right? Isn't that the whole thing? War is just chaos, and
I'm going to break my own rule about the podcast and say, no shit, Sherlock. It's just disturbing.
Again, we go back to all those wars before, they were all predictable. They went exactly as planned.
Right. Yeah.
No innocents were harmed. It ended right on schedule. But that World War I, man, that just got out of control.
We had that light brigade, and we knew exactly what we were doing with them.
I mean, you're assassinating archdukes,
and
and then one day, and then all of a sudden the whole continent's in chaos, and who knew? War is always unpredictable. I think we should move along.
Well, hold on. I do want to quote this other guy who's a history professor at the University of California, Berkeley.
Oh, I'm sure he knows then.
Daniel Sargent. He says policymakers in general exaggerate their own capacity to control historical events. I think that's right up there with war is always unpredictable.
I think he said politicians lie, but he used more words than that.
He did. It's interesting. All right. Number 3.
This one is like another tautology. History should be remembered. Again, I'm going to go back to all the wars before World War One. Wasn't there one probably a week before World War One? Right? Somewhere there was a war.
The worst thing about this for me is I was thinking about this statement a little bit because I was like, there's got to be more to say, or there's something, there's some essence of this that I'm missing. And I was thinking about it. The only thing I could come up with is I can imagine a bunch of Americans going, what has happened in history? We've had 2 world wars. We won both of those. Let's go have another one. Like that's.
Oh, you mean this is like a rallying cry?
It almost could be.
Remember the Maine.
Yeah, exactly. It's hey, we always kick ass.
Ready for another one.
It's so disturbing to me that this. How is this a conclusion? So I started thinking about it, and I was like, hey, maybe we should come up with some alternate things that should have been learned out of World War One, or additional things, since these are so important. So one I was thinking about actually goes back a lot further because a lot of the beloved founding fathers adhered to this idea that we should not have entangling alliances. And I was thinking maybe that's a point we should have gotten out of this.
Is that part of history that can be remembered?
Well, see, that is actually part of history that can be remembered. But what bothers me is just the idea of remembering history. So we record some facts. But isn't that what we do for history class these days?
We write them in these books, and we give them to children. Yes.
Memorize these dates.
Yes.
When things happened.
Mm-hmm.
But since we don't do anything with that, what does it matter if the history is remembered? So instead, let's remember the important cogs in the wheel of war. And one of them is alliances. Based on the very idea that, of course, Germany and Russia went to war over nothing but
pride.
Right.
A couple of miles of land. I mean.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. Russia would have never gotten into it if they weren't already allied to the Serbs.
Yeah, it was like a death pact, right? There was nobody's getting out alive.
Right. Well, and that was the thing. It was pact after pact that brought them down. And it's funny because you can see the same thing happening today, right?
Well, and it's funny too because they said that these packs were designed to prevent this very thing from happening. Right?
Exactly.
It,
These
it
aren't entangling. These help us.
it was the precursor to mutually assured destruction, right?
Yes, it was.
Totally didn't work.
Mutually assured safety carried right over into mutually assured destruction. I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
Yep.
World War to Cold War.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So, yeah, that's one thing that I was thinking about that we should talk about. And I think we have. What do you have any other ideas of lessons we should have learned from World War One?
To not to. I mean, I mean that it goes as well with these other three as anything. Except I did laugh out loud at what you put.
Well, when I was thinking about it, I was like, this sounds familiar, right? So there's this quote from The Princess Bride where I can't remember.
Buttercup.
Buttercup. No. It was the Sicilian guy. What's his name? The little short guy.
Yes, him.
I can't think of
He's
his
talking
name.
to Buttercup.
Yes. And he says, "You fell victim to one of the classic blunders, the most famous of which is never get involved in a land war in Asia. But only slightly less well known is this. Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line." And I thought, that's perfect. Like, that should have been point 4. Never go against a Sicilian when death is on the line. These are the kind of lessons that the neocons would have us get out of it, right?
Well,
Never get involved in a land war in Asia.
you need to be able to reduce it down to a soundbite that is easily digestible for everyone, right?
Right.
You know, the cause of the war was that someone shot this archduke.
Yeah.
Yada yada yada. We killed 9 million people.
Right.
You know, and back to the textbooks. That's how they're written, right?
Oh, yeah, it's exactly.
You get a paragraph, 10 lines of text, as you were saying, fact, no context,
Right.
or anything else, and you're just supposed to say, well, those guys were bad, these guys were good, they did a bad thing, they retaliated, and it is what it is,
Wait, which side were we on? Yes, that's the good side.
That's right. Yep.
Very disturbing. Something else I wanted to talk about that's kind of an outgrowth of thinking about these things. Did World War One ever end?
No.
So
that was the right
have,
answer, right?
We don't have a whole lot to say about that since we agree.
No, that's the other part about these sound bites is that we call them World War One and World War Two, and people really think. I think most people don't actually know much about World War One. I didn't for a long time.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, it's hardly taught.
And nobody really,
as I recall,
realizes that they're one war, right?
Yes. Yeah. 20 years or whatever.
They stopped they stopped shooting for 20 years.
Well, 20 years of retooling and re-equipping the militaries.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They manufactured more weapons and more ammo, while the one side
built giant, pointless fortifications.
But
yeah.
And the people became angrier and angrier, and then it exploded again, right?
Yeah. And then after all of World War II got done, then the U.S. decided they'd have a land war in Asia.
That's right.
That we call Korea. Which really, again, is just a continuation.
And then another land war.
We swapped enemies, but we did this over and over again.
And then another land war in Asia. So I don't think they're following number 3, that history should be remembered.
They're not doing that, certainly. I don't know that they know what diplomacy means. I don't think that's a real thing to them.
No.
Particularly when you can, as you said earlier, break a state down into a subgroup of quote-unquote terrorists. Once you can delegitimize a government then you can do whatever you want, apparently.
Well, and I don't want to give too much away here because I'm planning to make a video about it. But as we were talking about before we started recording, in Dinesh D'Souza's book, and I suppose his movie, which I haven't seen, about America and how awesome she is,
Isn't there a South Park line about? No, wasn't it a movie?
Team America.
Yes. Let's not quote that, but yes.
No.
Pretty sure that's the same thing.
His whole thesis is that basically might makes right. To your point about diplomacy, they cannot see past, regardless of whether you buy their presuppositions about America's values and all that. He goes into all these arguments with, well, other people have done this in the past, and we're the biggest. We're on top of the hill right now. Is basically what he says. So,
what kills me is
we don't need to be diplomatic.
It's the same apologetic you get for the British Empire.
Oh, it's exactly the same.
Right. It's just a continuation. Since they did it, got away with it, now it's our turn. And whoever is the superpower after us, it's going to be okay whatever they do.
Yes. That's exactly what he says. It's very strange, too, coming from a guy who is from India and would have seen, even though he left when he was young, would have seen all the effects of this imperialism. And yet he's... And
certainly you would have even if you weren't there, would read and understand what happened.
Yeah, instead he dives right in head first. So, I intend to either write a post about his book or make a video. And if someone wants to send me $10 to go see the movie in the theater, I might. Although I don't know if I want to take 2 hours of my life to do it.
If you send $20, he'll go and see it twice because I'm not going to.
I definitely won't see it twice. I will record it and put it on the internet for everyone, though.
Oh, man. So let's talk about some other stuff. Let's talk about how Nicholas II, the Tsar of Russia, and the Kaiser in Germany, Wilhelm, were cousins.
Isn't that something?
That's so neat. I wish that these two cousins could have been, like, I don't know, friendly toward each other.
They were friendly.
Oh, that's right. They went hunting and hung out all the time, right? Isn't it a shame that they couldn't, like, I don't know, talk to each other?
This is actually my favorite article that you made me read for this.
And you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Favorite in kind of like a dark and sadistic way. Right?
Because that's how we tend.
So this article is, I don't even know what it's called, Chummy Telegrams That Could Have Prevented the First World War.
Yeah.
About the messages that were exchanged between Nicholas and Wilhelm leading up to the war, I'm going to put that in air quotes.
Yes.
Trying to prevent the war. Actually, and if you as I'm reading it, it did sound like they
were actually trying.
They were actually trying at the beginning, but you can see where they, I don't know, they're just stuck in their position, I guess, in their power. I don't know what it is, but they were just entrenched so badly that they couldn't pull back and just be cousins at some point, right?
Yep.
A
line to back you up here, Nicholas wrote, "The indignation in Russia, shared fully by me, is enormous, and I foresee that that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me and be forced to take extreme measures." It's exactly what you're saying. It's like they were completely bottled up in their situation.
Yeah, and they couldn't. So it's a funny picture, right? Because you got these two heads of powerful states, right, who were trying to find this diplomatic solution, but they couldn't even control. They couldn't control anything, right? They weren't leading their countries; they were being driven. They couldn't even control the people that worked for them, right? When one of them, when Wilhelm sends a telegram or tells the chancellor to go
Yeah.
do a certain thing, he totally just ignores him and does the opposite, which makes the situation even worse.
Yep.
So there are these masters of the universe who can't even avoid starting a would have been small conflict to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm. It just points out to us the power of the bureaucracy too.
Yeah. Yeah, that right. If you think electing the guy at the top makes a difference, right? It's
Exactly.
um, and I think it too points out just the pride and the arrogance of they weren't even willing to like step out of their position to go around their staff. What he couldn't have gone and talked to his cousin like face to face.
Yeah. Hey, let's meet up in Warsaw.
Yeah.
Neutral ground. Let's talk about this a little bit. We'll also go out hunting. How do you sign a letter? You're loving Nikki.
I'm going to shoot you now.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get it. I can't imagine. And we know this was the same throughout all the nobility.
Oh yeah.
For years and years of all kinds of untold wars.
Wasn't the
just
Kaiser
like this.
Cousins with somebody in England too?
Well, just most of them came out were in the line of one of the English queens. Like almost all the heads of state in Europe were.
Yeah.
And so it's just sad that even with ties of blood, there could be no, even as autocratic as Russia was, there could be no control even then. And I guess that's actually a point for us, another point for us, that there is no control. It's all an illusion. Even when you are the dictator, it's still an illusion of control.
Yep. And even the ties of blood were not enough to keep the power of the state from doing what it does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I think that's another tick mark on our side for anarchism.
Yeah. There was one other thing I wanted to say about this. There's like a little introductory paragraph on this, and this is the first thing that caught my eye about this article that made me put it, and I'll just read it. A century after messages were exchanged between Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, they are vivid reminders of the perils of crisis management. Crisis management, I'd say. And the wisdom of preventive diplomacy to resolve challenges like today's territorial dispute in eastern Ukraine before the great powers are sucked into conflict. It actually says before they great powers, but I'm going to say that they meant the.
Yeah, wisdom of preventive diplomacy.
Well, and the other thing that bothers me is preventive diplomacy in the U.S. now means immediately accusing Russia of shooting down an airliner with a missile. That's the American version of preventive diplomacy, apparently.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to you're right. They don't know what diplomacy means.
Yeah, I think it's that simple. And of course, all of this leads me to another question. Of course, we said that World War I never really ended, but for the sake of argument, let's say that these wars aren't really all connected, and let's say that it with all the unrest and everything else, could World War III be around the corner?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. I don't know how likely it is. After reading this article, I think he did a good job of balancing, the idea that we can take an analogy from past wars and apply it to the present perfectly, right? He does a good job of debunking that, but I think it's more likely than he thinks it is.
I would agree with you. The ability to conflate in order to feed the machine of war is unsurpassed.
Yeah, the one thing he left out, and I'm sorry, we're talking about this article in The Atlantic by Graham Allison.
Yes.
Titled "Just How Likely Is Another World War," and he does 7 similarities and 7 differences from 1914 to 2014, and he's really talking about the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and China.
Yes.
For the most part, Japan's thrown in there too. But the one thing I think he leaves out is he sort of touches on it as far as communication and technology and the speed with which we have near real-time information, and there's unlikely to be miscommunication because we sent a telegram and it was hand carried by this guy and then he told this other guy, right? But what he leaves out of this is we also have institutions like the CIA and the NSA who are operating on a different layer that isn't even, he says, technology and transparency. This is the exact opposite, right? They're able to do more obscure things now than ever before, right?
Well, and I think that's the heart of the issue, is this idea that we have created the illusion of these things, while the military industrial complex, if you want to call it that, has created, as you're saying, a separate layer to channel their own aggression.
Yeah. To wage their own wars for their own.
Yeah.
Their own
That's
purposes.
the right words. Yeah. Another thing I didn't like, the whole rising nationalism thing. This bothers me in some ways, and it's not because of the things he points out, like China's all the problems that they've been having with the islands in the South China Seas.
Mm-hmm.
It's more the idea of nationalism in some ways can be a good thing in that it isn't internationalism. And I think he's arguing for internationalism in a subtle way here. And that, to me, that's more disturbing than nationalism in the long haul.
Well, and there's also a difference between nationalism and just, in the example he gives, just claiming what is rightfully yours, right?
Yes, right. Well, right.
It's not necessarily nationalism just to say you're doing the wrong thing, and not that we're advocating they should go to war, but it's not the same as saying we're going to go to war because we're Japan or we're China and we're better than you. And,
right. Well,
how dare you?
And the idea, I think the idea of local self-interest is not what he's talking about.
No.
And I think that's a fine thing. It's more the idea that I think he's looking to put a fascist flag on something, perhaps.
Yeah, that the nationalism will be what it sparks. Like, otherwise, there'd be no issue here. They'd just be able to work it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, but why do I have to have a flag over top of me in order to... Yeah.
Right. Well, apparently, with the new diplomacy, you have to have a flag when you tell the other person that they did something. You murdered all kinds of people.
You must have a flag. You will have a flag.
I'll give you a flag if you don't have one already.
I like this quote from this article where he's talking about World War I, and he says, but as the best of the new books on this conflict, World War I, Christopher Clark's The Sleepwalkers concludes forthrightly, the available evidence can be marshaled to support an array of competing claims. Quote, the outbreak of war in 1914 is not an Agatha Christie drama at the end of which we will discover the culprit standing over a corpse in the conservatory with a smoking pistol. Quote, there is no smoking gun in this story, or rather, there is one in the hands of every major character. End quote. I think that's...
And there's a smaller concealed one in the hands of every minor character.
That's right. And they're ready to club the guy over the head as soon as he leaves out the back door, right?
Yeah.
And
yep.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. There's no... And we say this, I feel like, almost every podcast, but there isn't always... There is never... This guy's good, that guy's bad, right? It's black and white.
Doesn't exist.
Right? It's most often, I'm going to go back to always again, everyone is bad, really. When we're talking about these kinds of things, right? There's some blame to be had on all sides.
Let's say it about everything. Everyone is bad.
Everyone is bad. But when we're talking about these types of issues, there's no good guy. right?
No.
Unless you literally had someone who refused to participate in any of it, right, and was just being attacked. We would probably sympathize with that, right? But that's not what
Like,
any of this
okay, yeah, like
ever is,
Switzerland.
right? That's
Switzerland's probably the hero,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because they did nothing.
Yeah, and the other problem too with all these discussions is it's always the country, right? It's never the people,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And there are people involved here, and there were people in every one of these countries who didn't want anything to do with these wars, but they were forced to be involved anyway, right? From people who were just in the way and were killed or maimed or expelled from their homes, or people who were drafted into these armies to go be killed or to kill other people.
There's something in the way you said one of those lines that made me start thinking. It's interesting. I think the Turks in World War I were trying to be the heroes by coming in kind of late after everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll be the deciding factor. And I think that's largely why or maybe not largely why, but I think largely why is because we won. But I think a big part of why the American people can swallow World War I and World War II is because they think, oh, America swooped in at the end and saved Europe.
Yeah, right.
And this idea that we came into it so late that we were the big heroes, when in actuality, and at least in World War I, we came in and extended a war that would have been over.
Yeah, and then I don't think anybody has a concept of the scale of the devastation, right? It's what's that quote? One death is a tragedy, but a million is a statistic, right?
Yes.
Nine,
Stalin. You're quoting Stalin again?
Yeah, again. I do.
You
that
look like
all the
him.
time.
You quote him.
Not 9 million people dead. There's not even. We need some kind of scale for that, and most of us, including me, it's hard to imagine, right? 9 million people dead today in a country is a lot.
Another disturbing thing that I was thinking about, I think yesterday, I don't remember, I was listening to something, and I was thinking about the fighting in World War II and the fact that, yes, a lot of times they were fighting in the rubble that they had just created, but a lot of times they were fighting in the rubble that had been created in World War I as well. Because it was only 20 years.
It was only 20 years, yeah.
It's just disturbing to me, and I guess it's a testament to a large degree to the at least pseudo free markets that were still existent back then. That things could be so rebuilt so quickly.
Yeah, amazing. Only to be destroyed again, though.
Yeah, of course. Well, the state will have its way.
So that's all your articles for World War I. It's very uplifting. I appreciate you bringing this to us this week.
It's what I do best.
It really is, unfortunately. No, it's good to talk about these things. It's good to, as the USA Today says, remember history.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as we made fun of that, if your remembering of history is insightful, then yes. It's good to remember history.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, now remembering history and just repeating history seem to be equated.
We're going to end today with a poem, actually, which will make Aaron happy since he actually,
Yay.
before he was a particle physicist, was a poet.
Oh, I'm still doing that.
This is from, I found this in Murray Polner and Tom Wood's book, We Who Dared to Say No to War, American Anti-War Writing from 1812 to Now. And it's by Florence Girton Tuttle. It's modeled after Rudyard Kipling's If, and it's called If, a Mother to Her Daughter. If you can lose your head when all about you are losing theirs and saying false is true, if you can feel that might alone is mighty, reverse your creed in all you say and do. If you can cast aside your private ethics and claim another law holds for the pack, if you can join in race annihilation and never pause to question or look back, if you can call yourself a Christ disciple, yet incense burn before the God of war, if you can chant with saints the sixth commandment, then plan to kill and kill some more. If you can keep your tender woman spirit and dull the charge of murder on your soul, if you can ease your conscience with a bandage and daily sit and dumbly roll and roll, if you can sing my country first and never observe the lands melt freely into one, if you can prove mankind is not united, led by one hope as by one rising sun, if you can doubt that greed of state must perish and God, the King, one sovereignty unfurl, you'll be a loyal patriot, my darling, and which is more, a thing of stone, my girl.